Hello, it's Einar from Unity Cloud. Today I'm going to interview Hadi Mikoski. Hadi, I have been interviewing him before in 2 videos. And one of the reasons I love to interview Hadi is because he is his own guru. He don't follow anybody. He finds his own questions and he finds his own answers. And that way he's not influenced by anybody else. And that's why you have your own answers, and that I think they're very great answers you have been coming with before. Today I want to start up with something I think it's more and more interesting. Illusions. The Buddhists talk about illusions. What are illusions? Illusions, is it important in your life or something? So I want to just ask you straight away, Hadi. You talk a lot about illusions in your last book. This one. I can show it more later. And how do you define an illusion?
I got Einar sent the questions over a few days ago. I had to look them over, and they're very deep questions. This is going to be a very it's not going to be grade 2 spirituality here, and I think I'm going to have to provide some personal examples and personal stories to help to share this discussion, because the word illusion is a vast topic and it's a vast word, and there's so many layers of illusion as to what that might represent. Right on the simplest level, what a magician can do on stage, how you look one way and you think the girl's in the box, and then you look the other way and she's not. That's an illusion. You've just been tricked into looking one direction when something else is happening in another direction. So there's all these levels of it. At the deepest level, when you normally hear the word illusion presented like in a Buddhist terminology, it means everything. Every single thing in your reality, in your perception, is illusion, is not actually solid and real and tangible. And the problem is, there's a gentleman named Gary Harmon. He gave one of the greatest illusion quotes I've ever heard, and that was, if you treat the world as an illusion but don't include yourself in that illusion, you've made the classic spiritual mistake. And I see that a lot. I see people, for one reason or another, recognize externally there's some sort of illusion out there, but they don't recognize that this here is also some form of illusion. That I'm real, but the world is fake, right? And that's not a part of the game. So we can get to that later, because that's like sort of the university level of illusion, which is everything is an illusion. And so how do you deal with that? But we can take it back a step and start saying, okay, but you as the person watching this are having an experience right now, whatever it is you're doing or what you did or what you're going to do, and how do you trust your experience? And that's part of the level of it, is how do you know if you're, for example, hypnotized or not? How do you know what you're perceiving is reality? Because the medicine people that I spent a lot of time with, Einar said I kind of do my own thing, which is partially true, but I have had a lot of really good people help me along the way. And they were always very clear that the world we see is nothing but a projection. Very similar to Plato's cave, the story of Plato's cave, where what the prisoners are seeing on the wall is not their reality. They've been tricked into believing what they see is actually real, and they react to it as if it's real, right? They get sad, they get happy, they get upset. But the more real reality is the projector in the back of the room projecting the reality, which is one level of illusion. But then there's another level of illusion, but what about the theater? Have you checked the theater? Maybe the theater's not real either. It's like in the Matrix, when Neo wakes up from the dream world, and he wakes up on the ship, but he never once decides to stop and say, is the ship and Morpheus and Trinity, is that an illusion too? So you see the mistake? He broke one level of illusion, but didn't go to the deeper levels. So that's part of what all this is. There's so many layers and levels of illusion, and we can talk about the different kinds of illusion there are, if you'd like, but that's a general overview to get people sort of directed as to where we're going to head here.
Inside this question, it's also a few interesting things like time loops.
Okay, let's talk about some of the different kinds of levels of illusion you might be experiencing, and this is, I consider them to be universal. So the first one I would say talk about is parallel realities. This is one that catches a lot of people, that the world you're experiencing right now is the only world there is. It exists the way it exists. There's only one of me, there's only one of you, there's only one room, and I've come to see that's not anywhere near true. I came to see that there are millions of me's, millions of you's living similar or very different experiences as this. And how that happened to me is it was 1999, I guess, and I had just finished a bizarre bachelor auction I'd been a part of, a date from a bachelor auction. And the woman who bought me was a severe drunk. And I was doing my best the whole night just to get away from her, actually. And the next day I was walking and I was replaying the conversation in my mind. And one of the questions she asked me was, why did you start this spiritual search anyway? It sounds kind of stupid. And I didn't answer anything at the time. But in my mind at this moment I said, because if I didn't, I would be dead now. And I got an image of a car that had been hit by a large truck. And the car was overturned in the ditch. There was another car that had been hit. I could see the woman in the car. She was injured, but alive. I could see the truck driver walking around kind of shocked. And then I saw the car was overturned in the ditch. So I went over to the car, went inside, looked at the driver, and the driver was me. And I realized, oh yeah, at this exact second of time, in another reality, at least one, I just died. I just actually had a crossing moment of two realities where I saw my own death. And it was at that moment I realized, of course, it makes sense that if the standard story is true, we're not saying it is, but if the standard story is true, that consciousness wants manifested beings in order to have experiences, well, why should you only have Einar Sorby live one life? As Einar, that doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you want him to live a billion lives? Because you would have a billion possibilities of experience, right? And all you have to do is change one little thing in your life at any moment, and your whole life will go a completely different direction. Your experiences would be untold. So I'll go into some more stories about this for everybody, but it helps to really make this clear that I've learned that if you're doing really well in this life, there's a life where you're not doing very well. If you're healthy in one life, you're sick in another. If you're happy in one, you're not happy in another. And so it's also good to not take everything so personally that's happening in your life, either to be too self-important, thinking, I'm great, look what I've done, look how far I've got, because if you could see some of your other lives, you're an idiot. And if you're having a really tough time, that also must mean in other lives, you're not. And what's interesting, like I said, you can cross these lives and you can get interesting cross-sections. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories that if that's okay, we'll talk about parallel realities.
I love stories.
Because this is when I was living in Toronto, and I was at a bar, and a woman came over to me and said, "Thanks for yesterday. It was a really great having you for as my wait." She was saying she was my waitress. And what? So yeah, you and your girlfriend were at my table yesterday, and had dinner. No, I didn't have dinner at your table. And as we had this long discussion, she was getting angry, angry, that I had been at her table and she was describing me and her life and told me about where I worked and what my girlfriend was like and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the conversation, it was years later, again, I realized, it's not like a doppelganger. It's not like somebody who looks like me. There was a crossing of realities where me from another reality was at that restaurant, and that reality, she was experiencing it, and now me shifted or she shifted or whatever. She wasn't like talking to someone who looked like me. She was talking about me. I was there with somebody who was having a much better life than I was having at the time. But again, it's one of these, right. So you can get these things called bleed-ins, which are very, very confusing for people. Another one was, this was a story from a guy whose favorite tool shop had closed years before, and he was so disappointed, and he had to go get a new tool, and he was talking to his wife how sad it was the store had been closed, and she said, "What do you mean? It's always open. You were there yesterday." The store's been closed for 10 years, honey. So they got into a fight. He got her in the car. They drove to what he expected was an empty lot. There's the store. Everything is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. He goes in and talks to the manager who's, oh yeah, good to see you again. Did you need the blah, blah, blah that you were asking for yesterday? I wasn't here yesterday. What the hell are you talking about? And this threw this guy, of course, into about a year of really messy mentality, because in his reality he'd been living, that his favorite store had been torn down and turned into a parking lot, and now he walks into a place where it's in complete existence and everything has been fine. So what is then real? Is the belief he had in his mind, which was very clear, that was his reality. What reality is true? How does this work? One last cross-bleeding story. I'm telling you these so you can think about your own life and think about things that you might say, that was a really weird experience, and I'll just, forget about it. Don't forget about it. These are things you really want to examine carefully, because it might be giving you clues and hints about you and your reality and where you are and where you're going. So another was this woman named Carrie in my high school. And she was very, very cute, very fun, dating, of course, the great guy of the school. So her and I were just friends. But in grade 12, we had this bizarre square dancing class in gym. And for whatever reason, we were matched up together to square dance for these 2 weeks, which of course we both thought, let's get this 2 weeks over and, get done with this. For whatever bizarre reason, we square danced unbelievably well together. We danced fantastic together, to the point that anytime something was going to be explained, we were the ones who did the dance together. And as time went on, I spent more and more time with her, and I had this very close connection to her, but I left to another university. She left living her life as normal. But I kept getting flashbacks all my life, like dreams of her, particularly when she might have a problem, or I was like, I know she's having a problem. And it wasn't until after the experience I talked about with you when I realized about my death, and I started looking into possible parallel realities. Then a few years after that, I saw parallel realities. Oh my God. Her and I were married in a lot of lives. We were married in like 50 or 100 lives together. Different things happened in our lives, and they moved, in that direction. So in this particular life, the two of us somehow could still, even without knowing it, we have this touch to these parallel realities where we're living these other lives, but they bleed in to this connection. Like, I would be curious to see, could we dance other stuff? Could we dance salsa? Could we dance swing? Could we dance, just to see, maybe in those lives we did some sort of high dance things together, and that's what bled into this life. So the point of making all these long stories to you is to help you to possibly see the reality as you experience it right now, even if it's completely true and completely perfectly accurate, may not be the only reality you're living in. There may be millions of you living millions of different realities. How's that for an illusion?
That's a great illusion. But I thought about another thing.
Yeah.
When you're talking about all these lives, we talk about reincarnation and so on. Then you think about living, when I die, I go into another life. But what you're talking about now is you don't go into another life. All the lives are going on at the same time.
Well, there could be both. I mean, you could be having multiple lives. So reincarnation in one sense might be true from the standard way you think of it, of one life, another life, another life, another life. But then there can also be another layer within that in which you also relive your same life billions and millions of times. Oh, it's also interesting. Let's say somebody is truly enlightened. Let's say they're awakened. They're a perfected being even. Okay, are they perfected in all their lives? Are they only perfected in this one? Does it matter if you perfect only in one life? Or what if you do become some sort of perfected being? Do you become perfected in all of them? So you see again this layer of specialness that that a lot of spiritual seekers take into themselves may not hold as much water as you think, because when there's a million of you, you're going to be at completely different places of life. Some you've already died, some you're alive, some you're not, it makes you really get a bit more humble, I think, actually. I think this topic gets you humble, because no longer can you think how great I am when you know there's lives where I'm not. And no matter how tough things are, there has to be lives when things are better. And I think people reach that in dreaming sometimes. They get views of other lives and they think it's just me dreaming, them doing something else. It might be, that's quite real. They're just tapping into life number 5,820.
Sounds really weird,
doesn't it?
Yeah, that's because we don't talk about it.
No. So imagine, like I've experienced it. I've experienced me living other lives. How do you deal with that? Actually, how do you deal with that?
You have to find out for you. You're the one that is really looking at it.
Yeah.
This was parallel realities, but time loops, is that something you've been talking about?
Yeah, that sort of plays into it, where the same events will play out over and over and over again.
Until you learn it or something?
I don't even think until you learn anything. It may just be, the loop just may be in place because it's a loop. So we don't know that, I'll reach, I'm 50 whatever years old now. I have no guarantee I'll reach 55 or 60 or whatever. I don't mean because I'm going to die before that. I might mean that this reality may only last until the age of I'm 53, and then reality itself actually stops and flips back and it all starts again. Similar to Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, where not when he dies, but it could just be there's a certain point where the whole reality just turns back on itself and starts again. And you can have multiple realities, because if a Mobius strip is one piece of paper that like folds back on itself. So it's not just one piece of paper. The piece of paper has multiple turns and twists in it. So yeah, multiple realities. You've got that. Then you've got the idea of projections, because as I said, what we are experiencing is a projection. It's not just what we feel and what we think. Like, okay, what we feel or think about the camera, what we feel or think about the woman running the camera, what we feel about each other, what we feel about the space. But the mind is, and this was something really odd that I realized, is that the mind never believes what you believe. You think you believe it, but you need the world, the external projection, to reflect back to you what you believe so you can believe it. If you want to think you're ugly, you need the world to project back ugliness. If you want to think you're smart, you need the world to project back smartness. If you need whatever you need, you as an ego don't really believe it, because it's, on some level, it's an illusion, no matter what you believe. So you need the world to reinforce it. So another good example is there's a woman I went on a walk with one time. She was asking me spiritual questions, and we walked for 2 hours, and I wasn't paying much attention in general. And right at the end of it, she said, as we were just about ready to leave, she said, "I hope I didn't bore you today." There it is. The question being sent by her ego to have a response back. "Nikki is fun. I enjoyed my time with you. You're really interesting." That's her whole 2 hours of conversation was set up to ask this one question and get the response she would hope. I didn't give her the response, of course. I gave her something else. Another fun one is, tell a person who is always thought to be successful or always thought to be smart or always, this is great with kids, 15, 16-year-old kid, "Oh, my son, Jim, isn't he wonderful? He's going to be such a successful guy." And just say, "Well, maybe not. I don't know. He might not be very successful at all." Watch the response. And it's not so much you're hurting them, you're hurting the egoic structure that is expecting the response to return from the projection in order to justify itself. So this is going on all the time. So you can watch this if you really start paying attention. This is one of the elements of self-observation, is watching, what am I wanting the world to project back to me to tell me I am? It's very weird.
Just to confirm your belief.
Yeah, whatever belief you have, because you don't totally believe it, so you constantly, like I say, you need the world to reflect it back. So if somebody is shy, they're going to be creating situations where they're able to tell themselves, yes, you can see how shy I am, how the world is responding to me. Or if somebody is really outgoing, it's the same thing. It's not so much they're being outgoing, they're being it in such a way that the world reflects it back to them. Very strange. Very strange.
Yeah, but interesting.
And then one more, we can talk about one more layer of the illusion in the dream itself, and that is parasitic entities. So there are entities that we don't see. There are the spiritual community likes to talk about angels and spirit guides and power animals, which is true. That side fully exists, but they tend to ignore this side. Not meaning you on that side, which are parasitic entities, demonic beings, because if you have one, you have to have the other. You can't have, in a dual world, you can't just have one thing. And these demonic beings, parasitic entities, get to people at a very young age and siphon off our energy, and again, get us to act and think in particular ways that help them get the energy that they want. So a lot of thoughts we have and a lot of actions we take, why did I do that? That doesn't make any sense, it's really stupid. And you can't even track back in your mind what could have got you to perform this 1 5-minute action or 2-minute action. We never think there could be unseen beings actually influencing our thought and action. And so there's another layer of illusion, right? And then there's a layer of illusion, which is the illusion we've been taught ever since we were in school, whether it be science, whether it's religion, whether it's history, whether it's law, whether it's commerce, whether it's anything, what a human being is, what nature is, and all of that is just a piece of information that's been presented to us, and we've been expected to agree with it and believe it. Not saying, this is just an idea, this is a theory we are presenting about history, it's a theory we have about science, it's a theory about religion, this is the truth and you better believe it. And so we've been taught almost everything we think we believe is just, an external projection coming from the system around us, trying to make us one of the system, one who believes everything the system wants.
Some kind of programming.
Exactly, it's a programming. Complete. So there's your depth of illusion that you're potentially dealing with in the dream.
Yes. Yeah, and also in real life.
Yes, I mean. I don't mean by real life. By dream, I mean the life you're having right now, which is a dream. But it's a highly manipulated, hypnotized, mentally controlled structure, and we don't see how that is. Yeah.
Yes, and then we can. The next question was a little bit more take it down from this word stuff and look at the illusions we have today. Okay. But I really now see myself the illusions in our society. Everybody has their own illusions, but now the illusions are being very strong in each side. Just like the vaccinations, somebody wants to be vaccinated, the other people does not want to be vaccinated, and the people that want to be vaccinated, they say, if you don't vaccinate yourself, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. No. It's almost so tough. And then I say, is that a practical way to see that people are in their own different illusions?
It's showing, I guess, it can show the use of belief structures, and the more emotion the belief has, the stronger of a response it gets. So if you say to someone, I think you're from the planet Mars, for the average person, it's stupid, there's no response, it triggers no emotion. But if you say to someone, I hear you're a Democrat, or you're a Republican, or you follow this political party, you must be stupid. Ooh. Because part of their identity is tied up in the belief. So what you're really seeing is it's partially an illusion, of course, but it's the belief structure and the amount of energy and the emotional energy that's holding the belief in place. Because great power comes from having a belief. There's nothing wrong with a belief, but knowing that it's something that's been probably in many cases chosen for us. We haven't really chosen it ourselves. We've chosen for various reasons to take that side. And if we know, maybe I believe this side, but I know a lot of times the other side is also true. That changes our emotional intensity in the belief structure and allows us to step back and shift beliefs as we need them, or as we feel it's warranted. We don't have to lock ourselves into this belief, this is true, and everyone who doesn't believe me is wrong. As now you get a lot of gray area where you can actually not only work yourself, but you can interact with people then. Yeah.
But it is really interesting because when you have a strong belief, that maybe is an illusion, but this belief also makes strong feelings.
It's both. The feeling makes the belief, and then the belief generates more feeling, and it's kind of like an endless cycle that's keeping it.
It's a loop.
It's a loop. It's a loop that keeps it going, and so to actually stop the loop is to begin examining it. Why do I believe what I believe? Why do I feel what's true is true? Now, normally you only notice this kind of emotion in a religious argument, usually, because the religious argument holds the most deep faith and energy involved in it. So if you question someone's religion, the response can be intense. Yes. But in all the other areas, it gets less and less and less and less. But right now, because we're in a world that is right now highly fear-driven, the fear that is being presented to humans is on a scale we've probably never seen since the Second World War, and that means people are very susceptible to having to turn to hold on to something that makes them feel solidified and have a foundation in the fear. So it doesn't matter what the belief is actually, as long as it's something, people will hold on to it. Now, of course, you can see the system is manipulating people to take the fear response in the way they want it to go. But in general, you can just watch and just see the average person is going to lock down into something, terrible word, that they are going to sink into any belief with a lot more emotion, because it helps them handle the fear of the unknown that's going on around them.
That's interesting. On the first question, I also have something, interplay between masculine and feminine. Does this come into this under these questions?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an illusion, but if you look at this from the ancient world, or from the way the ancient civilizations I checked, or the medicine men and people I've worked with, for them, a human needs to be as connected to nature as possible. That our way of being healthiest is living in a very natural state. And one of the natural states of being is, just like in nature, the interplay of the masculine and the feminine creates a balance. There's a masculine there's a masculine way of doing things, and there's a feminine way of doing things, and both are required and both are needed. So in our society over the last 40 or 50 years, first we noticed this destruction of feminine energy. We noticed that feminine was being pulled away from the world, and it was getting highly unbalanced to a masculine edge, pushing women to be more masculine. And now we're seeing that masculine energy is being pulled out of the world in many cases, forcing a lot of men to start becoming feminine. And that's creating a bizarre imbalance in the current reality. It's not that, like, you as a male have both masculine and feminine energy within you, and there are certain times you need to have a masculine energy, which should be maybe a 60 or 65% of the time. At 30 or 35% of the time, you need to act in a feminine way. But when all this is turned around, and now people don't know at the subconscious level, do I need to be feminine now? Do I need to be masculine now? Do I need to be this? It's very confusing for the average person, when if that was just more harmonized and balanced, the human world would automatically harmonize and balance, because a lot of confusion would just settle. So it is another type of illusion that's going on, that people are having trouble now. Like I say, now it used to be girls that had a real trouble understanding what it means to be a girl. Now it's young boys. Boys have a real tough time trying to figure out how they fit into the world. What's their life like? And it's very challenging to see the troubles like 12, 13, 14-year-old boys are having, trying to figure out how they fit into the system in the world that doesn't really kind of want them anymore. It's challenging.
We'll talk about programming in all societies, from school and so on. Do you think our leaders know that they are trying to make us believe in their illusion?
Everyone's trying to make us believe their illusion. I'll give you another example story. I was visiting a friend of mine 10 years ago, and he had a young daughter, maybe 2 years old. She was at the point where she could speak, but not a lot. And what was interesting about how she did everything is she always would say, like, Sally wants a drink.
Oh.
Sally wants to eat. Sally wants to go outside. Never I want to go out. Sally wants a drink. So the thing that was here was something separate from the person talking. That she herself was in this place of her and Sally are not the same thing, right? Very interesting to watch. But of course the parents would constantly be saying, no, you just want to say, I want a drink. Not Sally, I'm Sally, you're Sally. And so you could see this good-natured battle going on of the parents trying to make her be like them, which is, I am me in my body and this is me, as opposed to wherever this girl was still at this point, in some sort of deeper awareness where she and Sally were separate things. So this is happening on all levels. Some of it conscious by everyone, some of it not conscious. But it's as you watch parents work with kids, how schools work, how everything works, it's all designed to get people to identify more and more and more with themselves and their body and their structures and whatever the external system wants you to believe in. And if you don't agree with it, you get in serious trouble. Right? Like any school, particularly now, it's not about getting students to think. As a historian, it really bothers me because history can be such an interesting subject if you teach it in a way to get students to think about it. Here's the stories it's presented. What could you possibly look into this differently? So it's not about thinking. It's about presenting a bunch of information, memorizing it, and firing it back. And the more perfect you memorize it, the better grade you get. But you haven't been thinking. And of course, as soon as you're finished with the school year, you've forgotten it all.
Yeah.
You've forgotten it all. And it does very little good for you, as opposed to if you learned how to think and question and come up with your own ideas, whether they're right or wrong, but at least you've managed to come through and think about it. That's the kind of thing you'd want to have in your whole rest of your life. But the systems that are set up, they don't want people to think. People thinking and making their own decisions, that's a problem, right? They want people to do what they're told, follow the system, don't cause trouble, work the machines, and so it's yes, on one level they know partially what's going on. On another level, it's just like my friend with his daughter. That's what someone naturally would do in that situation, and that's how parenting works. But that doesn't mean it's creating less illusion or less confusion in a person.
Is that another thing I just thought about? When you have this, as a child, get these different viewpoints and you don't know what to do. Some people that are schizophrenic has this kind of background. I looked in the books and I read about that.
Yeah.
Politicians, they're also trying to get us to believe in their view of politics.
Of course. But anybody's trying to get you to believe.
Yes.
When I was a hockey coach, I needed to get my team to believe whatever system I wanted them to play, because if I thought that's how they were going to be successful and they all got together and played it, then they would be better. But if half the team said yes, half the team said no, well, it's going to be chaos. So on all levels, everyone on all levels is attempting to, you might say, get the people around us to somehow believe what we believe.
Well, that makes structure in society. Or else, what's the alternative? If everybody can do what they like and believe what they like, is that can there be chaos?
I don't know. I mean, I can only look back at the ancient past where they would probably only have one or two rules. The one rule would be treat nature well, treat other people well, or treat other as well as needed in the situation. That would be about it. The natural instincts would be able to, I think, kind of figure out what's right and what's wrong in most situations. I think there'd be very little need to step in if that was the native cultures. And I don't know this is 100% true, but I've heard this, that they never had a word for lying in their language because no one ever did it. So the word didn't exist and it didn't happen. And it was only when the white people showed up and they started lying that the Indians couldn't understand what was going on because they'd never seen it before, and they had to invent a word to describe it. So it's also this weird interplay. Does a word create, that if you don't have the word for it, does it exist? Right? This whole idea of the novel 1984, a big part of what George Orwell talked about the society in 1984 was not so much that they banned certain activities, they took the words away. That means if the people didn't have the word freedom anymore, if it didn't exist, then they wouldn't know what it is, so they couldn't try to get it. So you don't actually need to, so his point was you don't need to take away the thing, you take away the word and the thought of the thing, and the thing will disappear on its own. So again, how tied are we to the words of our mind and the words that are presented? Because in English, I don't know what the word is for in Norwegian, but when you learn to print on a piece of paper, you are spelling, right? That's the word, spelling. And when I place something of magic onto someone or someone, I'm producing a spell. Same word. So is the spell and the word is somehow connected. So is every word, everything that's written or said, in some way a magic spell?
That was a good one. That was that's something to think about,
isn't it?
In your book, you're talking about we act like robots. Is that blending into what we've been talking about?
Kind of. It's the presentation of how much conditioning we've taken in, how much externally we've just told to believe and act, and of course, whether it's with your parents, whether it was at school, whether it was with your social groups, whatever, you were rewarded when behaving in the way they wanted you to, and you were punished in some way when you did something else, right? So over time, in order to get some more pleasure and avoid pain, which sort of is a standard structure of the human being, or any creature, you find out that if I do this or I say this, I'll get pain, so I stop. So you obviously, without even knowing it, you're being conditioned. You're being conditioned, and it doesn't take long to just all of a sudden, every time there's a certain external response, you will react in a specific way. So when I say people are robots, it's because they will always respond the same way to the same external stimulus. They will never behave differently. So to unbecome that, you first have to check yourself. Again, it's about awareness. It's being, these ideas they talk about today, the big word is mindfulness. Mindfulness seminars everywhere. You can make $1 million if you start holding mindfulness seminars. But it is a valuable tool, but not the way people are teaching it. Mindfulness is just meant to be slowing down, watching what's going on inside of you, and then doing stage 2, which is questioning everything. I'm thinking this. Why do I think that? How can I track that back to where I started thinking that way? My sister just called and I'm having this reaction. Why do I have that reaction to my sister and not with other people? What's the deep understanding? And what you're doing is you are digging into your robotic behavior and your robotic thoughts. But yes, you have to be currently present, currently aware of what's going on externally and internally, or you'll miss the connection. So that practice is valuable if you're going to then take it to step 2. The problem is they keep it at step 1, that just this idea of I just stay thinking here, wow, life's going to be great, wonderful. But that's not, that's just the getting you ready for the real work that allows the transformation to take place. Yeah.
We're going to talk more about that in next video, part 2.
Oh, okay. I only saw the questions for part 1.
Okay, going to be in for a surprise then. My idea was to make a video about illusions, about how we look at the world. Part 2, a little bit about how can we come out of the illusions. So, but I still have more questions about illusions, and like on hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, on ordinary people, everybody that has traumas. The people that are in traumas, are they in some kind of illusion that's destructive or something?
Well, let's split this into two questions. So let's first start with the psychiatric patients you're talking about. My feeling is that a lot of people that are classified as having had a psychiatric break probably are people that broke the barrier of the dream, broke the barrier of reality in some place. Now, maybe they didn't go all the way to ultimate reality and see the totality of themselves and totality of God and whatever, which is one, complete awakening. Some probably did. Others at least just broke the barrier and hit a different reality, another. I didn't talk about, there's, never mind parallel realities, there's different layers of the reality we're in now. Some might call them dimensions, some might call them different frequencies. So you just change the radio dial. We're still in the same room, but we're operating at a different frequency, so we're experiencing different. And the more you move the radio dial away from the standard locked position, you might say the stranger reality gets. Lots of stories of that. And so if this happens to you and you're not in any way prepared for it, and you don't know what's going on, and then you're jumped back into standard reality, and you're already got a problem mind from old traumas, that's going to probably really screw you up, especially when you go ask for help from somebody and they just tell you, oh, you're crazy. There's no elephants on the street, there's no World War II fighter planes in the sky, there's no whatever, right? So no one else can possibly get the idea that you've broken a plane of into other realities. And so my guess is some, certainly not all, but some of the people who are in psychiatric institutions and psychiatric care are there because they've had an actual deep spiritual type experience, a reality breaking experience, and there's been nobody that can help them understand it. And that in many cases, some of these people could well be helped. I know myself, I've helped a couple just by sharing with them. I know, once I heard their story, no, I don't think you're crazy. This is probably, in my guess, what happened. This is where you went. This is the experience. And you can just see them just relax. They just relax. Things aren't as scary now. They're not as confused.
The fear is more gone.
The fear is gone, and again, the think there's something wrong with me is gone. And now they look at these experiences maybe not as psychotic episodes, but more as actual,
real life.
some sort of real life experience. This obviously happens to some people who take high levels of drugs. They can have various shifts of reality as well. But the problem is the drug can push you into places you're not ready to go, and certainly keeps you there potentially longer than you want to be. And that can also create a lot of problems when people come back, again, if they're not prepared for what can happen in these experiences. On the other side of your question, when you just mean trauma itself, you've had a traumatic experience in a younger state, it's going to cloud your life in very strange ways. So again, here's an example. So when I was about 20, 21 years old, my father, who was a con man, stole all my money. A person who cheats people out of money, professional con man. So in the course of stealing money from a whole lot of other people, he stole all of my money just before I went to university and finished my final year. So I couldn't finish my year of university at that time, and never mind, of course, the shame and the guilt and the layers of pain that the trauma itself brought on. But there also became these strange mental structures being created around money, with the idea being, of course, if I have money, somebody can steal it from me now, because now one of the people that you should feel most trusted by has, broken your trust. So that means, well, anybody can do this. I can't trust. Who can I trust, right? I can't trust anybody then. And so some people might turn that into an illusion of becoming very miserly and controlling everything and knowing where every dollar is. Or it was on my side where I got the opposite. Just as soon as I had money, well, I just gave it away, or I bought something, or I didn't want to have it, because if I had it, it could get stolen. So I might as well, have done something with it. So on one level, I didn't try to bring a lot in, and what I did, I just moved out really quickly. And that's, of course, an illusion. That's not correct thinking. But that's the thinking that built out of the trauma. That was just the egoic structure trying to handle the situation that it was under, and this was a way of saying, okay, now you're safe, now you're protected. And so you'll see these kind of walls get built depending on the trauma, which are very logical to do at the time. And this is also something that's quite, that someone who's gone through any of these traumas and has these walls has to recognize that even though you can recognize the wall as a wall and recognize it's maybe not helpful right now anymore, at the time, it was the best thing you could do to keep going. It was the best thing you could do to not like roll into a ball on the floor and just, you know, collapse on yourself. So you have to also in some way acknowledge that the trauma at the time gave you something that was protected, that you needed, but maybe it's now time to examine it and start to let the protection go and start, you might say, rebuilding rebuilding a new illusion that is better for you.
Yeah.
You're not rebuilding truth, of course, but you're rebuilding an illusion that at least you're choosing.
Yes.
And not eliminating the trauma, you're then at least acknowledging the trauma, acknowledging what came from it, acknowledging how difficult it's been for you, and can start saying, okay, I can build a different structure.
What about traumas that you experience as a child and you forget it? And you have this trauma, you don't know where it comes from.
Oh, yeah, those are harder to deal with, I think. Those are harder. I think we all have them too.
Yes.
And some worse than others. And I think it's an unseen part of all this is how traumatized so many children are and have been. The trauma that people have gone through in their lives was way more intense than the average person thinks or believes. And yes, a lot of it has been blocked away. In some shamanic traditions, they talk about soul loss, where actually like a piece of the personality literally leaves the structure. It actually goes somewhere else to handle the experience of the trauma at the time, and in many cases doesn't come back. It's so scared, it just stays there. So now the person is living their life with two things. One, they don't have the memory of the trauma because the part that has the memory is gone, you might say. And whatever part that might be, say it's the ability to use humor, or it's the ability to think clearly, or it's the ability to whatever, that's the part that left. Now they don't have that. They don't have access to this key part of their own being. And so they're living life always one step short. And that's one element. It's called now in white tradition, it's called a soul retrieval, but Native Indian traditions, that's not what they do in Native Indian traditions, but it is part of their healing ceremony, something similar to that, where they are, you might say, reconstituting or re-putting together a person who's been fragmented. And those fragmented parts, I used to do some of these years ago. I haven't done one for a long time. And some of these parts, some of these soul parts, at times can be easy to come back. You just have to go and talk to them, explain the situation. But the challenge in that is I'm seeing the trauma, right? Like and in fact, it got to the point where I was experiencing the trauma. So that was harsh because some of the traumas were fucking ugly, you know? And I was not just seeing it, I was the person having the trauma. So it was really tough coming out of the trauma, out of the soul retrieval, because then I'm not just sitting with a person who I'm sharing trauma with, I'm them. I am that person. And it was really hard to deal with because in that moment, if they asked me to do anything, I would do it. Because that wasn't another person, I was them in that experience. So I mean, it was also my way of experiencing the total oneness of reality. I was doing it through another's pain. But in those cases, they can come back fairly easily. It's when these things go to really dark, difficult, hidden places and they don't want to budge, those can be really hard and really scary to get back. But if a person is willing and they're ready and they want the parts to return and the parts are brought back, now the healing can happen, but the person is going to have to acknowledge the old trauma, remember it, start dealing with it, and start integrating the part that left again, bringing that very young part of the self back and reusing that skill or ability or whatever it is that they haven't had for a long time. And that can take months or years to fully integrate all that.
This is, I think, one of the big problems of today.
Yeah.
You look at all the drug addicts in town, I would think that lots of them has traumas that they don't know how to deal with it, and they have a very difficult life.
Everybody.
Yeah.
There's almost, I would imagine there's maybe 1 to 5% of the population that doesn't have soul loss on some level. Because it doesn't have to be a huge trauma. I mean, you're 10 years old, you're a girl, you have your favorite doll, and your older brother takes a doll, throws it on the roof, laughs at you, runs away, and now your doll might be lost forever. You don't know, and that to the 10-year-old girl is tremendous trauma. Maybe they get the doll back in a day or two, dad goes up, but that traumatic moment has not been dealt with, has not been fully healed. And so it can stay there. Something as simple as that can stay there for a long period of time, and who knows, again, what walls and structures get built around that experience, So I would say almost everybody is suffering some form of soul loss who has not gone through the procedure of bringing them back.
Yes,
and of course, yes, the bigger the trauma, the more traumas, the deeper the traumas, the more fragmentation there's going to be, the more messy the person's life will become.
I see lots of these people get drug addicts.
Right. So again, for us, it's like sometimes I think, try to wonder, wow, what was their life like?
Yeah,
to put them there. How because they're not there by choice. Like, they're not on the streets being a drug addict because they woke up when they were 3 years old and say, this is the life I want. Boy, this looks great. They're there based on certain experiences that push them into this place, and they had to be pretty damn bad. Yes,
that's why I think it's important that people know about it, because maybe you can look at the drug addicts as human beings that has had big problems. And
but again, that for me, that comes from all these experiences when I was still doing these soul retrievals and living the experience with it. So like I say, some of them were just beyond insane. And so it gives me a completely different feeling of others, knowing that these traumas are in their life too. And it's not just me who has all these traumas, right? I've got tons of them myself. We all have them.
But for us more normal people...
Okay.
Okay, I'm a pretty normal guy.
You're pretty normal, yeah.
And if I have some of my experiences from when I was...
That's my phone, I didn't turn it off. We're just going to ignore it.
Okay. To get away my traumas, one of the easiest things is to talk with your parents about what happened when I was young. Maybe they have his stories that I don't know about, that can explain some of my traumas.
Yes.
Some ways I think and so on.
Yes.
So that's why I think it's very important to talk with your parents, grandparents, and talk about when you were a baby, when you were small.
However, a lot of people have parents either that they can't talk to, or will never be honest with them, or will always be trying to manipulate them, or so.
I'm talking about more normal.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. But yes, if you come from a sort of more normal family environment, then yeah, you can talk and ask these things of your parents, of your aunts and uncles, maybe your brothers and sisters, and see if they remember stories or little things that you don't, and it can give you some clues on. Or of course, there's the life recapitulation, where you review your life yourself.
Yes, that's maybe too deep to go into that.
Yeah, we won't go into it now, but that is another.
I think we talked about that in the previous video.
Maybe. I'm going to do one on my own YouTube channel now. Some people have asked about it, so I'm going to do a complete recapitulation video.
Yeah. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
Howdy McCoskey Talks.
Okay.
It's been running for 3 whole days.
Wow, fantastic.
I finally gave in.
Yeah, well, of course you should have one. And one last question that has the same.
Okay.
The real issue to get away from a really bad illusion you have, is that to see the illusion, to see the story. If you see the story, what happened when the girl threw the doll
Right.
your brother threw the doll on the roof, and maybe she forgot this. If she sees the reality about this illusion,
Right.
crazy people also, if you tell them what really happened to them when they were a child, then they get to go into it themselves and believe it. Can this help to open up the illusion to something better? A bad illusion to something better?
Well, what it does is when you see something that's been hidden, and it doesn't matter what it is, I don't know what the illusion is, right? It can be anything from your schooling, something that you had learned and believed in school for a long time, and then if all of a sudden you do some other research and you say, wait a minute, the complete opposite is totally true. This is, garbage. Then right away you're stepping back from all that then happens is it gives you a space. I wouldn't say it heals anything or it changes much initially. What it does is it creates space, because before you've been full of that particular illusion, and now for a moment that kind of dissolves a little and you have this space where you are free to now examine that in more detail, and maybe you want to create more space, maybe you'll bring the same illusion back in, but you're bringing it back in now at a more conscious choice rather than this external projected hypnotized way of doing it. So it gives you space to examine and make some choices yourself, what you want to replace in your mental structure.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. This is maybe part 2.
Then let's just end with this last thought then for this whole thing. So we've talked about illusion and how it relates in the dream and to us. Again, there's this last layer of illusion, which is none of it is real. Just like Neo in the Matrix, the whole world he'd been living in his whole life is nothing but a manufactured computer projection, and or a holographic image, or however you want to look at that. And of course that's another complete level of depth, but some people watching this might be there, might be touching that, might be, and yes, that's another part of total illusion busting, to have to say, how do I know the reality I'm experiencing is real and not a dream? How do I know I'm not dreaming? And what happens if I wake up and reality goes away? So I just want to leave it at that too, that is the deepest level, but as you've seen from all we've talked about, it can be a long way for someone to ever get to that point to start. But some of the people in the psychiatric hospitals, that may have happened to them. They were here and they jumped, boom, all of a sudden, and then they're back. Well, that's now becomes a tough way to live here if there's not someone that can share with them what happened to them.
That's true. One last question in this section. This is also a little bit far, but our illusions. Everybody has their own illusion. Is this illusion our playbook in life to learn? Everybody says that we're living here to learn, but do we have all these different illusions just to learn something special?
No. Again, that's the problem with what can you learn from false, other than that it's false. Now you can learn within the dream to alter and shift and be more happy, be more natural, be more whatever, right, in the dream. But at the deepest level, because there is nothing to learn, like what does Neo have to learn from the Matrix itself? Only that he's in the Matrix. So actually the only one thing that illusion is meant to teach you is that right now you're trapped in illusion. You're trapped in false. You're in a prison cell. What's your choice? Do you want to make your prison cell nicer and more comfortable, or do you want to get out? That's really, if there's anything that illusion is meant to do, that's it. Are you going to try to make your prison cell better? Or are you going to look to see what happens if I get out? And of course, the strange thing about it, the really strange thing is, the prison cell we're in is not locked. The door is wide open. We just keep ourselves in the prison rather than have enough courage to see what's on the other side of the open door. That's that Zen concept, right? The gateless gate. There's a gate you cross, but the gate isn't locked. It's open. It's always been open. It just requires the courage to turn away from everything and go through it.
Go through this. That's a very good last ending here. We're going through illusions now. I think it's been super interesting to get your views at as this. Some of them are really new to me. And we're going to have a part 2 video where we're going to talk about a little bit more how to get out of the illusions, if we ever can do it. What is higher self? What is your soul? I want to get Holly to tell me what differentiate between the inner observer, self, and what is these things, and what is the difference between them. So that's going to be in part 2.